$39 trillion. That is what the United States government owes right now. And before you think, that's Washington's problem, not mine, let me show you exactly where that number shows up in your life. Your mortgage rate, your credit card interest, your car payment, your grocery bill. Every single one of those numbers is higher because of $39 trillion, and most people have no idea. Since February 28th this year, your household has been paying approximately $7,700 just to cover the government's interest bill. Not in taxes, not directly, but through higher borrowing costs on everything you buy on credit, everything you finance, everything you owe. The government borrows $7.39 billion every single day. That borrowing competes with you for the same pool of money. And when the government competes for credit, the price of your credit goes up. Today we follow that $39 trillion from Washington to your kitchen table. We spent weeks going through data from the Congressional Budget Office, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the Century Foundation, the Center for American Progress, and Moody's Analytics. What we found connects 5 things most Americans think are separate problems. They're not separate. They're the same problem. And it has a single source. Let's follow the money. Here is something nobody explains clearly. When the US government needs money, it borrows it. It sells treasury bonds. And whoever buys those bonds wants a return. Right now, the government is paying 3.373% interest on its debt. That's $1.04 trillion this year alone in interest payments. That is more than the government spends on Medicare, more than it spends on Medicaid. Interest on the debt is now the single largest category of federal spending. But, and this is the part most people miss, government borrowing doesn't just cost taxpayers. It costs every American who borrows money. Here's why. When the government floods the bond market with trillions of dollars of new debt, it has to offer higher interest rates to attract buyers. And when government bond rates go up, every other interest rate in America goes up with them. Your mortgage rate, your credit card APR, your auto loan rate, your student loan rate. Every single one is priced relative to the government's borrowing cost. So $39 trillion of government debt means $39 trillion worth of upward pressure on every interest rate you pay. And you are paying for it right now, every month. Let me put the $39 trillion in human terms. $39 trillion divided by 130 million American households. That is $300,000 of national debt per household. Your share of Washington's credit card. You didn't choose that number. Nobody asked you. But the interest on that number is showing up in your monthly bills right now in 5 specific ways. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate was supposed to fall this year. The Federal Reserve had been expected to cut rates at least once in 2026. That cut never came. Why? Because the Iran war pushed oil prices to $4.52 a gallon, 50% higher than before the war. And when inflation is running at 3.8% and energy prices are spiking, the Fed cannot cut rates without risking reigniting the exact inflation problem it spent 2 years fighting. So the Fed is frozen and mortgage rates stay high. But here's the thing, most financial journalists won't say plainly. The Fed would have struggled to cut rates even without the Iran war, because the government is borrowing so much money, $7.39 billion every day, that cutting rates risks creating an inflationary spiral regardless of oil prices. The $39 trillion debt is itself an inflation engine, and the Fed knows it. Let's make this real. The median American home now costs $400,000. At today's 6.46% mortgage rate, your monthly payment is $2,507. If the Fed had cut rates as expected and mortgages dropped to 5.5%, your payment would be $2,271. That is $236 less every month for 30 years. Over the life of the loan, $84,960, $85,000. That is what the debt trap is costing the average American homebuyer in 2026, before the first coat of paint. In 2021, the average credit card interest rate was 16.45%. Today, it is 21.52%. That is a 5 percentage point increase in 4 years. It does not sound dramatic until you do the math. The average American household carrying credit card debt owes $11,507. At 21.52% APR, that household is paying $2,476 every year in interest alone, not paying down the balance, not making progress, just servicing the interest. $206 every month, gone, just to stay in place. But here's what makes this story different from every other credit card explainer you've seen. That 21.52% rate is not random. It is not just greed, though there is plenty of that too. It is mathematically connected to the federal funds rate, which is mathematically connected to Treasury yields, which are mathematically connected to the $39 trillion national debt. Every percentage point of credit card interest above what it should be at a healthy borrowing level costs American credit card holders collectively $12.5 billion per year, flowing from your wallet to bank profits, because the government ran out of money. President Trump called for a 10% credit card interest rate cap in January 2026. That bill is stalled in committee. It has not passed. It has not been enforced. Your credit card company is still charging you 21% or 24% or more, and Americans paid $253 billion in credit card interest and fees last year alone. In 1 year, from American households to banks. The average car payment in America right now is $680 per month. $680 every month, just for the car. That is before insurance, before fuel, before maintenance, before the war pushed gas to $4.52 a gallon. In 2018, the average car payment was $480 a month. In 6 years, it went up 40%. Why? 3 reasons working together. 1. Trump's tariffs on imported cars and auto parts pushed the average price of a new car to nearly $50,000, the highest in history. 2. Interest rates stayed high because of the debt dynamic we just explained. Auto loan rates that were 4% in 2021 are now 7% to 9% for most buyers. 3. Because monthly payments became unaffordable, Americans started taking out 7-year auto loans instead of 5-year loans, stretching the payments out, paying more interest in total, staying underwater on the car longer. 86 million Americans are currently carrying auto debt. That is 1 in 4 Americans, paying an average of $680 a month. $57 billion in car payments every single month flowing out of American households. And the delinquency rate on those loans just hit the highest level ever recorded by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The highest ever recorded, which means millions of Americans who took on $680 a month in car payments at 8% interest on a $50,000 car cannot make those payments anymore. The wheels are coming off. What happens when a household maxes out every credit line it has? It enters what economists call a debt spiral. It borrows new money to pay old interest. It falls behind on payments. Its credit score drops. It can't refinance. The interest rate on new debt goes higher. It borrows more to cover that. The spiral tightens. American households are now entering that spiral collectively. Total household debt hit $18.8 trillion in Q1 2026, an all-time record. More than 10% of student loan balances are now past due. Auto loan delinquency at the highest level ever recorded. Credit card delinquency approaching 2008 financial crisis levels. And the research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York shows something alarming. Delinquent borrowers are likely to be behind on more than one type of loan at once. It's not one bill they're falling behind on. It's the car, and the credit card, and the student loan, all at once. That is the definition of a debt spiral. And it is happening right now, in May 2026, to millions of American families. While the government adds $7.39 billion more to the national debt every single day. Everything I've told you so far, mortgage rates, credit cards, auto loans, the debt spiral, the mainstream financial press has covered pieces of it. What almost nobody has connected for a general audience is what happens next. The national debt is projected to hit $40 trillion before the end of 2026. At current pace, another $1 trillion in approximately 147 days. By 2036, the Congressional Budget Office projects the national debt will reach 120% of GDP. That would surpass the previous all-time record set just after World War II. Here is the compounding problem that almost no politician will explain clearly. When you carry more debt, you pay more interest. When you pay more interest, you have less money for everything else. When you have less money, you borrow more. When you borrow more, rates go higher. When rates go higher, your cost of borrowing goes higher. The spiral feeds itself. This fiscal year, the US government will pay over $1 trillion in net interest payments for the first time in American history. $1 trillion. That is $88 billion per month, $22 billion per week, $3 billion per day, just in interest, not paying down the debt, not funding schools or roads or defense, just servicing interest on money already spent. And by 2028, the CBO project's interest will consume 14.94% of all federal outlays, 15 cents of every federal dollar. gone before a single service is funded. The delayed bomb is not a metaphor. It is already detonating. In slow motion, in your mortgage rate, in your credit card statement, in your car payment, in the grocery prices that are rising because inflation won't come down, because the Fed can't cut rates, because the debt won't stop growing. Stay with me. Before the last piece, fairness demands I tell you who is winning, because the $39 trillion debt crisis is not a crisis for everyone. Banks are having record years. When credit card APRs go from 16% to 21% and 227 million Americans carry cards, the additional interest revenue is extraordinary. Americans paid $253 billion in credit card interest and fees last year alone. Asset managers who hold treasury bonds benefit from higher yields, which come directly from the government paying more interest on its debt. Hedge funds that bet on rate movements profit every time the Fed signals it cannot cut. Defense contractors received $200 billion in supplemental war funding from the Iran conflict, funded by new government debt, adding to the $39 trillion. The cost is not distributed equally. The middle-class family with a $680 car payment, a $2,507 mortgage, and $11,500 on their credit card, they're paying for the debt. The bank collecting 21% APR on that credit card, they're profiting from it. That's not opinion, that's arithmetic. The government owes $39 trillion. You don't owe it, but you're the one paying it every single month in your mortgage rate, your credit card interest, your car payment, and your grocery bill. Washington borrowed the money. You're servicing the debt, and nobody in Congress will say that plainly on television. That's $7,700 this year alone from your household, just to cover the interest on a bill you never agreed to. A 21-mile strait in the Persian Gulf didn't start this. This started decades ago. One bad decision at a time. Nobody asked you. If this video helped you understand something the news hasn't explained plainly, share it with one person who needs to hear it. That's how this channel grows, not through clickbait, through information that actually matters. We post every week. Subscribe if you want to know what's coming next, because there's a lot more coming.